Space rippled like water as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system. 12 massive dreadnoughts materialized first, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems. Behind them came the destroyers, sleek and deadly, followed by hundreds of support vessels. Admiral Lee Jae-ho watched the tactical display update as his sensors swept the system. What he saw made him frown. "Navigation, confirm our position," he ordered. "Confirmed, Admiral. We are at the coordinates provided by the Villani," Han Yuri replied. "But sir, I'm detecting massive fleet movements throughout the system." The main screen showed two distinct groups of contacts. One cluster near the system's inner planets showed organized movement patterns, clearly the Villani evacuation fleet. But approaching from the opposite direction was something else entirely. "Weapons, what are you seeing on those outer contacts?" Lee Jae-ho asked. Song Ki-tae studied his readings with growing alarm. "Sir, I count over 800 ships in attack formation. They're moving directly toward the Villani positions. Energy signatures suggest active weapon systems." "The Krek swarm," Dr. Shin Yoonji said quietly. "They're already here." Colonel Choi Min-soo stepped forward. "Admiral, recommend we move to intercept. The Villani evacuation fleet is trapped between us and the enemy." "Agreed. Signal the fleet. Combat alert status 2. All ships prepare for possible engagement." Throughout the human fleet, alarm klaxons sounded as thousands of crew members rushed to battle stations. The peaceful rescue mission had just become something much more serious. Communications Officer Park Mina turned from her console. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Villani fleet. They're requesting immediate contact. Put them through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly Admiral Lee Jae-ho found himself looking at the strangest being he had ever seen. Elder Veltar appeared tall and graceful, with pale green skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold infinite gentleness. When he spoke, his voice was musical, almost hypnotic. "Greetings, humans of the Sol system. I am Elder Veltar of the Villani Federation. We are grateful beyond words for your arrival. Your Mercy fleet is truly magnificent." Lee Jae-ho blinked. "The translation must be wrong. Elder Veltar, I am Fleet Admiral Lee Jae-ho of the Terran Defense Coalition. We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible. What is your current tactical situation?" The alien's expression showed confusion. "Tactical situation? I am not familiar with this term. We are evacuating our people as the Krek swarm approaches. We had hoped your humanitarian vessels could assist with the evacuation." Now it was the Admiral's turn to look confused. "Humanitarian vessels? Elder, we are a military fleet. We came in response to your request for military assistance against the Krek swarm." Veltar's large eyes grew even wider. "Military, but we asked for mercy fleets, peacekeeping forces, medical ships and transport vessels." Dr. Shin Yoon-ji leaned toward the Admiral. "Sir, I think there's been a translation error. They asked for mercy, but our systems translated it as mercenaries." The realization hit both sides at the same moment. The Villani had asked for humanitarian aid, but the humans had understood it as a request for military contractors. "Elder Veltar," Admiral Lee said carefully, "regardless of the translation error, you still have a hostile force approaching your people. We are here now and we will help." Captain Yoon Tae-sung of the destroyer TCS Retribution requested permission to approach the Villani flagship for face-to-face contact. 20 minutes later, he and a small diplomatic team transferred to the Peaceful Dawn. The meeting was unlike anything in human experience. The Villani ship was beautiful beyond description, with flowing organic curves and gentle lighting that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. There were no weapon systems, no armor plating. Nothing that suggested conflict had ever been considered in its design. Captain Yoon found himself in a conference room that looked more like a garden than a military briefing area. Living walls covered with flowering plants surrounded a table made from what appeared to be polished crystal. Elder Veltar greeted them with formal bows. "Welcome aboard the Peaceful Dawn, honored humans. We are grateful for your presence, though we confess confusion about your capabilities." "Elder, may I ask about your ship's defensive systems?" Captain Yoon inquired politely. "Defensive systems?" Veltar tilted his head. "I do not understand. Why would a ship need defenses?" Engineer Ko Hyun-woo, who had joined the diplomatic team, stared at his readings. "Sir, this ship has no shields, no armor, no weapons of any kind. It's built for maximum efficiency and beauty, but it couldn't survive a meteorite impact." Dr. Shin Yoon-ji was busy taking biological readings of their hosts. What she discovered amazed her. Captain, the Villani stress responses are completely passive. When faced with danger, their brain chemistry actually makes them calmer, more cooperative. They're literally incapable of aggressive behavior. How do you handle conflicts? Captain Yoon asked Veltar. Disputes over resources or territory? We negotiate, we share. We find solutions that benefit everyone. Veltar's voice carried genuine puzzlement. How else would intelligent beings behave? Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout both fleets. The Krek swarm had accelerated their approach and would reach the Villani evacuation fleet in less than 6 hours. Captain Yoon excused himself and contacted Admiral Lee immediately. Sir, you need to understand what we're dealing with here. These people have never experienced warfare. They don't even have the concept of violence in their culture. And the Kreks? Unknown. But if they're aggressive enough to send an entire species into panic, they must be serious predators. Admiral Lee studied the tactical display. The Krek's fleet was massive, but their ship designs were unfamiliar. No way to know their capabilities until contact was made. All ships assumed defensive positions around the Villani evacuation fleet, he ordered. We'll find out what these Kreks are capable of soon enough. Elder Veltar watched from his ship's observation deck as the human vessels moved into formation. He had never seen anything like it. The coordination, the purpose, the subtle threat in every movement. These humans moved like predators, but they had come to protect. Elder, called Defense Coordinator Sil Wen, the human ships are positioning themselves between us and the Kreks. What are they planning? I believe, Veltar said slowly, they intend to fight. The concept was so alien to Villani thinking that several council members needed medical attention. Fighting was something that happened in ancient history, in the time before civilization. No modern species would actually engage in combat. But as the Krek swarm approached, energy signatures blazing with hostile intent, the Villani began to understand that not every species in the galaxy had evolved past the need for violence. Queen Commander KRX 9841 studied the new arrivals with interest. The additional ships showed advanced technology, but they were vastly outnumbered. More prey had arrived, nothing more. The Kreks had devoured 17 civilizations. They had never been stopped, never been challenged. Their hive mind was perfect for coordinated attacks, and their numbers were overwhelming. But the Queen Commander had one critical gap in her understanding. She had never encountered a species that had evolved on a death world. She had never met humans. In 2 hours, that gap in her knowledge would prove fatal. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. A meeting between a hive mind that consumed worlds and a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain. On the most dangerous planet in known space, the Villani watched in terrified fascination as two forces of nature prepared to collide. They had prayed for mercy and received something far more dangerous, protectors who had never learned to lose. Fleet Admiral Lee Jae-ho stood on the bridge of the TCS Indomitable, watching as the massive dreadnought prepared for hyperspace jump. Around him, his officers worked with practiced efficiency, checking systems and running final diagnostics. The ship hummed with barely contained power. Fleet status report, he commanded. Navigation Officer Han Yuri looked up from her console. All vessels ready for jump, Admiral. Battle Group 7 is at full combat readiness. 12 dreadnoughts, 48 destroyers, 327 support vessels. Lee Jae-ho nodded. It was impressive firepower by any standard, but for humanity, this was just a routine deployment. The kind of force they would send to deal with pirates or investigate a minor border dispute. What's our estimated arrival time? He asked. 6 days? 14 hours at current hyperspace velocity, replied the navigation officer. We should arrive well before this Krek swarm the aliens mentioned. Colonel Choi Min-soo entered the bridge, his combat armor gleaming under the ship's lights. Behind him walked his aide, Sergeant Ryu Woo-seok, carrying a datapad with troop readiness reports. Admiral, the Marine contingent is ready for deployment. 2 full regiments plus specialist. We've prepared for everything from evacuation assistance to light combat operations. Good. What's your assessment of the situation? Choi Min-soo consulted his datapad. Based on the alien transmissions, we're dealing with a peaceful species facing some kind of aggressive force. The Villani seem to have no military experience, so we might need to provide security while they evacuate their populations. Weapons Officer Song Kitai turned from his station. Sir, I've been analyzing the Villani ship signatures. Their vessels show no weapon systems at all. Not even basic defensive measures. How does a spacefaring species survive without any form of protection? Lee Jae-ho frowned. It was a good question. Human ships had been armed since the first space battles in Earth's solar system. The idea of building an unarmed starship seemed impossible. Maybe they've never needed weapons, suggested Communications Officer Park Mina. If they've lived in peace for generations, they might not have developed military technology. That would make them sitting ducks against any aggressive species. Song Ki-tae replied. How have they survived this long? Dr. Shin Yoonji, the fleet's xenobiologist, entered the bridge carrying her research tablets. I've been studying the Villani biological data from their transmissions. They appear to be herbivorous with brain structures optimized for cooperation and problem-solving. Their stress responses are completely different from humans. Different how? The Admiral asked. When humans face danger, we get aggressive. Fight or flight response. Our bodies prepare for combat. The Villani seem to have only the flight response. When threatened, they try to escape or hide, never to fight back. Colonel Choi scratched his chin thoughtfully. That explains the lack of weapons. But how do they handle conflicts? Territory disputes? Resource competition? They probably negotiate and share, Dr. Shin replied. It's actually quite efficient if everyone involved thinks the same way. But what happens when they meet someone who doesn't think that way? Asked Weapons Officer Song. The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the implications. A species that had never learned to fight, facing something aggressive enough to send them into panic across multiple star systems. Admiral, Han Yuri called out, we're receiving updated intelligence from Earth. Long-range sensors have detected massive movement in the target system. Multiple fleets, very large signatures. Lee Jae-ho moved to the sensor station. The data was still preliminary, but it showed dozens of large contacts moving through space. Near the Villani system. Could be evacuation fleets, suggested Colonel Choi. Or the enemy force, Song Ki-tae added. Grimly. We'll know soon enough, the Admiral decided. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. We launch in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, in the Villani system, Elder Veltar was having his own problems. The Krek swarm had arrived ahead of schedule, and their scout ships were already probing the outer colonies. The evacuation ships are only 60% loaded, reported Defense Coordinator Silwen. We need more time. How long until the human mercy fleet arrives? Veltar asked. 3 local days, assuming their calculations are correct. Veltar studied the tactical display. Red dots representing Krek ships moved steadily inward, while blue dots showed Villani evacuation vessels struggling to clear the colonies. It would be close, very close. What about the Krek ships? How many have we detected? Silwen's voice was barely a whisper. Over 400 major vessels, sir. With support fleets, we estimate 1,200 ships total. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The Villani had perhaps 50 ships total and none of them were armed. Send another message to the humans, Veltar ordered. Inform them the situation has worsened. Ask if they can accelerate their arrival. The message traveled through space toward the approaching human fleet. When it arrived, it caused quite a stir on the bridge of the Indomitable. 1,200 ships? Colonel Choi repeated, reading the translation. That's a significant force. For them, maybe, Song Ki-tae replied. Depends on what kind of ships we're talking about. Lee Jae-ho studied the message carefully. The Villani seemed genuinely terrified, but their concept of a large fleet might be different from humanity's. Still, 1,200 ships was nothing to ignore. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Increase hyperspace velocity by 15%. We arrive in 4 days instead of 6. That will stress the engines, sir. Engineer Ko Hyun-woo warned from his station. The engines can handle it. These aliens need help, and we're going to provide it. As the human fleet pushed through hyperspace, both sides prepared for what they expected to be a rescue mission. The Villani cleared their worlds and gathered their people, expecting to be evacuated by gentle humanitarian vessels. The humans checked their weapons and planned defensive strategies, expecting to protect civilians from some kind of raider attack. Neither side understood what was really coming. The Krek swarm was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. A hive-minded species that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but dead rock. They had devoured 17 civilizations in the past 50 years, and their hunger was growing. Queen Commander KRX-9841 directed the swarm from her massive hive ship. Her compound eyes studied the tactical displays showing Villani ships fleeing like frightened insects. Soon, all their biomass would feed the swarm's endless appetite. The Queen Commander had heard reports of additional ships approaching the system, but she paid them little attention. More prey species coming to die, nothing more. The swarm had never been stopped, never been challenged. They were the apex predators of their region of space. But the Queen Commander had never encountered a true Deathworld species. She had never met humans. In 4 days, the three forces would meet in the Villani system. The herbivorous Villani, fleeing for their lives, the insectoid Kreks advancing to feed, and the humans arriving with enough firepower to sterilize planets. The galaxy was about to learn that there were still surprises left in the universe. And some of those surprises had evolved on a small blue world, where everything tried to kill everything else. And the smartest predators had learned to cooperate. The countdown continued, and space itself seemed to hold its breath. The stars looked different when you knew death was coming. Elder Veltar pressed his long green fingers against the observation window of the Villani flagship, Peaceful Dawn. Behind him, the Emergency Council argued in their musical language, but their words could not hide the fear in their voices. The Krek swarm will reach our outer colonies in 47 standard days, Defense Coordinator Silwen announced, her voice trembling like leaves in wind. Our fastest evacuation ships need 60 days to clear even half the population. Veltar closed his large, gentle eyes. The Villani had lived in peace for over 3,000 years. Their ships were built for exploration and trade, not war. Their weapons were mining tools that could barely scratch an asteroid. Against the Krek swarm, they might as well throw flowers. Have we received any response to our distress calls? Asked Council Member Rindal, hope flickering in her voice like a dying candle. Nothing from the inner systems, Silwen replied. The Galactic Council is in session, but they move slowly. The Altari peacekeepers are engaged with border disputes. The Zenthian Mercy fleet is 3 sectors away. Veltar turned from the window. Through the ship's hull, he could see the refugee fleet stretching into space. Hundreds of vessels packed with families, children, elders, all looking to their leaders for salvation that might never come. Send the distress call again, he ordered. On all frequencies. Use the emergency protocols. Silwen nodded and moved to the communications console. Her fingers danced over the bioluminescent controls. Broadcasting now on all known channels. Universal Translator is active. Light years away, on Titan's ice-covered surface, Park Woo-jin sat alone in the deep space monitoring station. Coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. The night shift was usually quiet, filled with routine checks and maintenance reports. Tonight was different. The computer chimed with an incoming signal. Woo-jin frowned at his screens. The signature was unlike anything in Earth's databases. The transmission was weak but persistent, repeating every few minutes. Computer, analyze signal origin, he commanded. Signal originates from grid reference 447 Alpha, approximately 15 light-years from Sol system. Unknown civilization, universal translation protocol engaged. Woo-jin leaned forward as text began appearing on his screen. His eyes widened as he read the translated message. Emergency broadcast to all spacefaring civilizations. The Villani Federation requests immediate military assistance. The Krek swarm approaches our worlds with intent to consume all life. We have no adequate defenses. We desperately need mercy fleets and peacekeeping forces. Please respond if you can provide military aid. Time is running out, the message repeated, growing more urgent with each transmission. Woo-jin's hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication link to Earth Defense Command. This is Titan Station calling Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha emergency. I have an alien distress call requesting military assistance. Repeat. First contact situation with request for military aid. Admiral Kim Sora was reviewing fleet deployment reports when the call came through. She had been expecting routine updates from the outer system patrols, not this. The communication officer's voice was tight with excitement and fear. Patch me through to Admiral Lee Jae-ho immediately, she ordered, and get me a full translation analysis of that signal. Within minutes, the Fleet Command Center buzzed with activity. Officers moved between stations preparing reports and analysis data. The large central screen displayed the translated message alongside technical data about its origin. Admiral Lee Jae-ho arrived 20 minutes later, still adjusting his uniform. The veteran officer had served in 3 different conflicts, but this was something entirely new. First contact with an alien species, and they were asking for military help. What do we know about these Villani? He asked. Lieutenant Commander Han Yuri stepped forward with a datapad. Based on their transmission patterns and ship signatures, they appear to be a peaceful species. Their technology is advanced but shows no military applications. They're facing something called the Krek Swarm. And this Krek Swarm? Unknown, sir. But if the Villani are desperate enough to broadcast on all frequencies asking for military aid, it must be serious. Admiral Kim Sora studied the star charts. The location is within our patrol range. We could have a battle group there in 6 days. Lee Jae-ho nodded slowly. The Villani are asking for help. Earth has been looking for opportunities to establish ourselves in galactic politics. This could be our chance. What kind of force would you recommend? Admiral Kim asked. Battle Group 7. 12 dreadnoughts, 48 destroyers, full support fleet. Standard police action deployment. The room fell quiet. A standard police action fleet was enough to pacify an entire solar system. But they had no idea what they were facing. Do it, Admiral Kim decided. But this is officially a humanitarian mission. We're responding to a distress call. Back in the Villani system, Elder Veltar received the first piece of good news in weeks. The communications officer's excitement was clear in her musical voice. Elder, we have received a response to our distress call. A species called humans from a system they call Sol is dispatching a fleet to assist us. Relief flooded through Veltar's body. How large is their mercy fleet? The communications officer consulted her readings. The translation is unclear, but they mention 12 large vessels and dozens of support ships. They will arrive in 6 local days. Excellent. Do we have any information about these humans? Very little. Their transmission protocols are advanced, suggesting a developed civilization. They seem eager to help. Elder Veltar felt hope returning. Perhaps the Villani would survive this crisis after all. Prepare our finest diplomatic vessel. We will welcome these humans properly. Send a message thanking them for their mercy. Silwyn activated the transmitter again. Grateful thanks to the humans of Sol System. The Villani Federation eagerly awaits your mercy fleet. We will prepare proper welcome ceremonies for your humanitarian vessels. The message flew through space toward Earth, where it would cause considerable confusion, but that was still days away. For now, both species prepared for a meeting that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. On Earth, Battle Group 7 prepared for deployment. Colonel Choi Min-soo inspected his Marines, while weapons specialists loaded the most advanced ordnance humanity had ever created. They thought they were going to help some aliens with a minor conflict. In the Villani system, families packed their few possessions and boarded evacuation ships. They thought salvation was coming in the form of medical ships and transport vessels. Neither species realized they were about to witness the collision of 2 completely different ways of looking at the universe. The Villani had never met a predator species. Humans had never met anyone who wasn't one. The countdown to contact had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The main Krex fleet arrived 6 hours later, expecting to find their advance forces feeding on Villani biomass. Instead, Queen Commander Carson 98 discovered a debris field where her scouts should have been, and something that challenged everything the Krex thought they knew about the universe. The human fleet hung in space, like a collection of sleeping predators, their dark hulls reflecting starlight in ways that seemed to absorb rather than illuminate. Rescue operations continued around the Villani evacuation fleet, but every human ship maintained perfect combat readiness. Analysis, the Queen Commander demanded through the Hive link. Her subordinates fed data directly into her consciousness. 12 enemy capital ships, 48 smaller vessels, hundreds of support craft. By Krex standards, this was a minor force. The swarm had over 2,000 ships, including her personal dreadnought, the Consuming Void. But the wreckage of 400 Krex vessels suggested that normal mathematics didn't apply to these new prey. They fight differently, reported Sub-Queen Car 743. Their tactics are unknown. They coordinate without hive mind communication. They show no fear response. Queen Commander Kark 9841 studied the tactical displays. In 800 years of conquest, the Krex had never faced significant resistance. Species either fled or died, usually both. These humans seemed prepared to do neither. Deploy the full swarm, she decided. Overwhelming force. They cannot stand against our numbers. Admiral Lee Jae-ho watched 2,000 enemy contacts appear on his tactical display without visible concern. Signal Captain Go Yeonju on the Indomitable. Execute Plan Omega. Signal all ships, weapons free. Engage at will. What followed was the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Though not in the way anyone expected, the human fleet moved like a living thing, each ship anticipating the movements of every other vessel. Captain Go Yeonju led the heavy assault group in a sweeping flanking maneuver while the destroyers formed a defensive screen around the Volani evacuation fleet. Pilot No Junseo found himself leading 3 full fighter squadrons against the advancing Krek swarm. On paper, it should have been suicide. 600 small human fighters against 2,000 massive enemy ships. Listen up, people, he broadcast to his pilots. These bugs think in straight lines. They've never fought anything that didn't run away. Show them what happens when prey evolves teeth. The fighter attack was poetry written in plasma and explosions. Human pilots, trained from childhood in 3-dimensional thinking and split-second decisions, tore through Krex formations like bullets through tissue paper. Every pilot knew exactly where every other pilot would be, creating a web of destruction that the hive-minded Krex could not predict or counter. Lieutenant Commander Park Ji-won of the destroyer TCS Thunder coordinated point defense for the entire fleet, while simultaneously directing offensive operations against Krex heavy units. Her weapon systems tracked over 300 targets at once, engaging each with precisely calculated force. Target the bioorganic nodes, she instructed her gunners. Intelligence suggests those are their command and control centers. The Krex ships were marvels of biological engineering, grown rather than built. But their organic nature made them predictable to humans who had spent millennia studying biological systems. Every Krex vessel had vital organs, and human weapons found them with surgical precision. Captain Seo Mi-young commanded the heavy cruiser TCS Dauntless as it carved a path through the center of the Krex formation. Her ship's main guns spoke in measured intervals, each shot eliminating a target that had threatened innocent civilians. Engineering, status report, she called. All systems green. Captain, replied Chief Engineer Ko Hyun-woo. Fusion reactors at 80% capacity. We can maintain this rate of fire for 6 more hours. 6 hours? Captain Seo smiled grimly. This will be over in 2. The boarding actions began when Master Sergeant Ryu Woo-seok led his demolition teams onto disabled Krex vessels. The mission was simple: ensure no Krex ship could ever threaten anyone again. Remember, he told his troops, these aren't prisoners of war. They're an invasive species that needs to be eliminated. Stay focused. Stay alive. The human Marines moved through Krex ships like antibodies through an infected organism. Where they went, the biomechanical infrastructure died. Corridors that had pulsed with alien life fell silent. Command nodes that had coordinated swarm movements went dark. Private Song Minna planted her 15th demolition charge in what appeared to be a Krex nursery. The sight of larval creatures designed to consume sentient beings made her job easier, not harder. Charges set, she reported. This ship won't be growing any more monsters. Colonel Choi Min-soo coordinated the boarding operations from the Indomitable's command center. His tactical display showed dozens of human teams working their way through disabled Krex vessels, turning each one into a tomb for the hive mind's ambitions. Team 7, what's your status? He asked. Package delivered, Colonel, came the reply from Corporal Kim Hae-jin. Krex breeding facility is permanently offline. Moving to next target. The systematic destruction of the Krex fleet continued with mechanical precision. Human weapons found weak points that the swarm didn't know it had. Human tactics exploited behavioral patterns the Krex couldn't recognize. Human determination overwhelmed hive mind coordination. Dr. Shin Yoon-ji worked frantically to understand what they were fighting. Captured Krex specimens revealed a disturbing truth. The swarm wasn't just aggressive. It was pathologically unable to consider nonviolent solutions. They're hardwired for consumption, she reported to Admiral Lee. No capacity for negotiation, no concept of mercy. They exist to feed, nothing more. Then we exist to stop them, the Admiral replied simply. Medical Officer Jang Hee-won treated the few human casualties in the fleet's medical bays. Most injuries were minor. Cuts from debris, bruises from sudden acceleration, the occasional broken bone from equipment failure. The Krex weapons, designed to terrorize fleeing prey, proved largely ineffective against opponents who refused to be terrorized. "How are we doing this?" asked Nurse Kim Yoo-jin, bandaging a pilot's wounded arm. "Because we're designed for it," Dr. Jang replied. "Every human in this fleet descends from survivors. Our ancestors faced predators, natural disasters, plagues, wars. The ones who lived were the ones who fought back." Intelligence Officer Bae Sung-ho continued decrypting Krek's communications, revealing the scope of their threat to the galaxy. "Admiral, the Kreks have consumed 17 civilizations in the past 50 years. All herbivorous, all peaceful. The Vallani would have been number 18. Admiral Lee studied the data with growing anger. 17 civilizations. Billions of lives lost to creatures that killed for pleasure. Signal the fleet, he ordered. No Krek's vessel leaves this system operational. None. Queen Commander Karex 9841 watched her swarm die with emotions the hive mind had no words for. Ship after ship fell silent, their bioluminescent signals fading to black. The overwhelming numbers that had conquered so many worlds meant nothing against these impossible prey. "Retreat signal," she commanded desperately. "All remaining units withdraw to hyperspace." But the humans had predicted this. Captain Go Yeon-ju's heavy assault group had positioned itself to cut off escape routes. The fleeing Krek ships found themselves trapped between the hammer of human firepower and the anvil of calculated positioning. "This is for 17 civilizations," Captain Go announced as her dreadnought's main guns targeted the Queen Commander's flagship. The consuming void, a bioship the size of a small moon, died in a series of explosions that lit up the entire system. With it died the central intelligence that had coordinated one of the galaxy's most successful predator species. The battle lasted 3 hours and 27 minutes. When it ended, the Krek swarm that had terrorized the Outer Rim for generations no longer existed. Elder Veltar stood on his ship's observation deck, watching debris clouds that had once been an unstoppable force of destruction. Around him, his people worked to process what they had witnessed. "They saved us," whispered Council Member Rindal. "They did more than that," Veltar replied. "They eliminated a threat to the entire galaxy, and they did it because we asked for help." Communications Officer Park Mina received the first of many messages that would arrive over the coming days. Distress calls from across the galaxy, from species that had lived in terror of the Kreks for generations. "Admiral," she reported, "we're receiving dozens of transmissions. Other species want to know if the reports are true. Did we really destroy the Krek swarm?" Admiral Lee looked out at the debris field where 2,000 enemy ships had once threatened innocent lives. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them the Galactic Protection Fleet is officially open for business." The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes salvation came not from the gentle, but from those strong enough to choose gentleness. And sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who hunted other predators. The first shots came without warning. 3 Krek's heavy cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the human fleet, their bioweapons charging with sickly green energy. Queen Commander Karex 9841 expected the new arrivals to flee like all prey species did when faced with Krek's might. Instead, Captain Lim Dong-hyun of the destroyer Soul's Fury calmly gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "Target the lead cruiser, full torpedo spread, fire." 6 plasma torpedoes streaked through space, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city. The Krek's heavy cruiser, built to intimidate primitive civilizations, simply vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. Aboard the Vallani flagship, Elder Veltar stared at his displays in shock. One moment there had been a massive enemy ship, the next there was only glowing debris. "What happened?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. "The human ship fired some kind of weapon," reported Tactical Observer Rendal, her musical voice shaking. "The Krek's vessel was eliminated." The second Krek's cruiser lasted 8 seconds longer before 3 human destroyers focused fire on it. The third tried to retreat but found itself facing the guns of the dreadnought TCS Retribution. The massive ship's main batteries spoke once, and another Krek's vessel became expanding gas and metal fragments. Queen Commander Kirk's 9841 felt something she had never experienced before. Confusion. The prey species were fighting back and they were winning. This violated everything the Kreks understood about the natural order. "All units advance formation 7, she commanded through the hive link. "Overwhelm them with numbers." 100 Krek ships surged forward, their organic hulls gleaming with bioluminescent threat displays. Against any normal species, this show of force would have ended the battle before it began. Admiral Lee Jae-ho watched the approaching swarm with calm professionalism. Signal the fleet. Execute Plan Delta 7. Show them what humanity learned about warfare. What followed was not a battle in any sense the galaxy understood. It was a demonstration of applied physics by a species that had turned violence into an art form. Captain Seo Mi-young of the heavy cruiser TCS. Dauntless coordinated orbital strike patterns while her ship's computers calculated firing solutions for dozens of targets simultaneously. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Jun-ho, had trained for this moment his entire career. Multiple targets locked. Firing sequence initiated. The Dauntless opened fire with everything it had. Particle beams carved through Krek's armor like hot knives through butter. Missile volleys sought out enemy ships with relentless precision. Point defense systems created walls of destruction that turned incoming Krek's bioprojectiles into harmless dust. But it was the fighter squadrons that truly amazed the watching Villani. Pilot No Jun-seo led 36 human fighters against the Krek swarm in a display of coordination that seemed impossible to the gentle herbivores. Dragon Squadron, break by pairs, attack pattern Omega. Remember, these ships are built for intimidation, not maneuverability. The human fighters moved like a school of deadly fish, weaving between Krek's vessels and striking at weak points with surgical precision. Every human pilot had trained against multiple opponents, had learned to think 3 moves ahead, had been taught that survival meant never giving up. The Kreks, designed to overwhelm terrified prey, found themselves facing opponents who became more dangerous when threatened. Every human ship they damaged seemed to fight harder, not flee faster. Colonel Choi Min-soo watched the space battle from the marine deck of the Indomitable. His orders were simple: board any Krek's vessel that survived the initial barrage and ensure it could never threaten anyone again. "Attention, Marines," he announced over the comm system. "Intelligence suggests these Kreks are hive-minded. That means they think as one unit, react as one unit. Use that against them. Stay unpredictable." Master Sergeant Ryu Woo-seok checked his demolition charges one final time. In his 20 years of service, he had learned one fundamental truth. Sometimes the only way to save lives was to take them. These Kreks threatened innocent civilians, and that made them targets. The first boarding action began when the heavy transport TCS Anvil locked onto a damaged Krek's battleship. Instead of trying to capture the vessel, the human Marines had a different mission entirely. They boarded the Krek ship to destroy it. What they found inside defied description. The Krek's vessel was more grown than built, with organic corridors that pulsed like living tissue. Biomechanical warriors twice the size of humans skittered through the passages on insectoid legs, their mandibles clicking with hostile intent. Against any other species, the sight would have been terrifying. Human Marines took one look at the alien monsters and began systematically hunting them down. Corporal Kim Hye-jin led her squad through the Krek's ship's engineering section, placing charges with professional efficiency. "Remember your training," she told her troops. "They're big, they're scary, but they bleed just like everything else." The Krek's warriors found themselves facing something their hive mind could not process. These small bipedal creatures showed no fear response. When wounded, they fought harder. When outnumbered, they became more coordinated. When facing certain death, they smiled and charged forward. Medical Officer Jang Hae-won worked frantically in the human fleet's medical bays, treating casualties from the boarding actions. What she discovered amazed her. Most human injuries were from equipment malfunctions or accidents, not enemy action. "How are we taking so few casualties?" she asked Dr. Shin Eun-ji. "Because we evolved for this," the xenobiologist replied, studying captured Krek's biodata. "Look at their physiology. They're built to hunt prey that runs away. Rigid mental structure, predictable attack patterns. They've never faced persistence predators before." Intelligence Officer Bae Seung-ho burst into the medical bay with a datapad full of decrypted Krek's communications. "Doctor, you need to see this. The Kreks were planning to spend 6 months harvesting the Villani worlds. They brought larval ships to establish breeding colonies. 6 months to consume 12 worlds?" Dr. Shin frowned. "That's incredibly inefficient. Unless you enjoy the process," Bae replied grimly. "The Kreks don't just kill prey species. They feed on terror. The longer the victims suffer, the better the Kreks like it." The realization sent chills through both officers. The Villani hadn't just been facing death. They had been facing something far worse. Aboard the Villani flagship, Elder Veltar watched the human fleet systematically dismantle the Krek swarm with clinical precision. What had seemed like an overwhelming enemy force was being reduced to debris at an alarming rate. "How is this possible?" asked Council Member Rindal. "The humans are outnumbered 10 to 1. "Numbers don't matter if you know how to fight," Tactical Observer Rendal replied, her voice filled with awe. "Watch their coordination. Every ship knows exactly where every other ship will be. They move like a single organism, but one made of predators." Elder Veltar studied the human battle formations with growing understanding. They're not fighting like separate ships. They're fighting like a pack, like hunters who have worked together for years. The battle that the Kreks had expected to win in hours was over in less than 90 minutes. Queen Commander Karix 9841 found herself staring at tactical displays that showed impossible results. Over 400 Kreks vessels destroyed or disabled. Human losses, 3 fighters damaged, 0 ships lost. For the first time in the Krek swarm's existence, the Queen Commander felt fear. Admiral Lee J-Ho surveyed the battlefield with satisfaction. The immediate threat was neutralized, but intelligence reports suggested this was only the advance force of a much larger Krek's presence in the region. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Begin recovery operations, and prepare a message for Earth Command. We've found the galaxy's wolfpack, and someone needs to put them down permanently." The Villani evacuation fleet hung in space, safe for the first time in weeks, but their rescuers weren't the gentle mercy ships they had expected. They were something far more dangerous and far more effective. They were humans, and the galaxy was about to learn why Deathworld species made the best protectors.